Tonight, special prosecutor stirs controversy, dismissing petition to probe missing Galamsey excavators with the excuse that the petition does not raise any issues of corruption, with the CID already investigating the scandal.
There's a deliberate attempt by the special prosecutor to decline jurisdiction to investigate the matter and to allow the CID to play politics with this particular matter and come out to clear these individuals.
We have details as policy think tank IEA warned the office of the special prosecutor risk being corrupted.
He hasn't prosecuted a single corruption case. In fact, if we are not careful, the special prosecutor's office itself will be corrupted.
This is Top Story with Evans Mensah.
Top Story is always brought to you by Bond Savings and Loans. Your success, our passion. Also brought to you by Gassem Cement, the nation build, and Vodafone. The future is exciting. Ready. Special Prosecutor Martin Amidou has tonight stirred controversy, dismissing a petition to probe the missing Galamsey excavators with the excuse that the petition does not raise any issues of corruption. Now, Mr. Amidou also argued that he could not probe the matter while the police CID also investigated the same issue. The civil society group Alliance for Social Equity and Public Accountability, ASEPA, had petitioned the special prosecutor to probe the highly controversial subject. My colleague Gifty Andopia joins me now with details of Mr. Amidou's response to that particular petition. What was Mr. Amidou's conclusion when he reviewed the petition?
So the conclusion, Evans, is what you've just said. Lack of basis for a corruption-related investigation and concerns over duplication of efforts. So I'll give you verbatim what is starting from the second paragraph, which deals with the lack of basis for a corruption-related investigation. It reads, a review of your letter of complaint, however, has led this office to the conclusion that the facts and conjectures upon which you underpin your complaint do not raise any issues of corruption and corruption-related offences as narrowly defined under Section 79 of the Office of the Special Prosecutor Act 2017 to warrant any investigation by this office. It goes on to say that in view of the fact that the matters disclosed in your letter may aid the Ghana Police Service in their investigations, this office is by a copy of this letter forwarding a photocopy of your letter to Criminal Investigations Department of the Police Service for consideration and possible action. So that's the conclusion, Evans said.
He also mentions the police investigation as a basis for dismissing the petition as well.
So beginning of the letter, he, of course, addresses those who sent it. And then he says the Criminal Investigations Division of the Ghana Police Service had already commenced investigations into the matters referred to in your letter long before you submitted your letter to this office. He says in those circumstances, it would not have been in the interest of safeguarding the public purse for this office to refer to its investigation division the same matters of investigation concurrently, even if your complaint fell within the mandate of this office. And that's when it goes on to talk about the lack of a basis for corruption-related investigation. Evans.
Thank you very much. Let's speak to the Executive Director of ASEPA. They filed this particular petition with the Office of the Special Prosecutor. Mensah Thompson is Executive Director there. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, for time here on Top Story. We'll also be speaking with Mr. Kojo Asante. He is a lawyer and Director of Advocacy and Policy Engagement at the Center for Democratic Development, just to get a sense of what the lawyer's eye is on this particular response written by Martin Amidou. Mr. Thompson, what's your reaction to the response you got from the Special Prosecutor?
Thank you very much, everyone. A very good evening to you, service listeners. First of all, it's disappointing. I must say that we are very disappointed with the response from the OSP, especially on the basis of which the Special Prosecutor decided to decline legitimate jurisdiction to investigate this matter. First of all, the issue that we petitioned against is a matter of corruption. It deals with missing excavators, missing gold, missing weapons, and money that were released to the Interministerial Committee on Illegal Mining to fight Galamsey, which all cannot be accounted for. Then, The second fact is that the people involved in this Galamsey fight or in this Galamsey corruption are people who are politically exposed individuals, like Professor Frimpong Boateng, like Mr. Eko Owisi, like Mr. John Bodu, and a host of others who are all politically exposed individuals. So I am confused when the special prosecutor is saying that it cannot investigate this particular matter. I'm a bit confused.
No, but he bases that conclusion. At least we'll come to the police investigations shortly. But the substantive basis when it comes to why he believes he can do this, when he talks about whether it has anything to do with corruption, he says that what your petition you submitted is a combination of fact and conjecture, and that does not raise any issues of corruption or corruption-related offences as narrowly defined under the law that sets him up.
Again, that is something I cannot fathom with, because if you read the same paragraph, the special prosecutor goes further to say that they are referring the petition and all the accompanying evidence that we gave them to the police CID because they believe it will help them in their investigation. And I'm wondering, if our petition is made of conjectures, if the evidence we submitted are all conjectures, how is that conjecture useful to the CID in their investigations? So clearly, you see that there is a deliberate attempt by the special prosecutor not to look into this particular matter. And I'll refer you to 2019, when this Galamsey expose by Anas Arimeyao Anas came up. We remember very clearly when the matter was with the CID and they were investigating. The special prosecutor came out and said clearly that they have jurisdiction to investigate that matter. Even when the CID came up subsequently to clear Mr. Charles Bishu and others, still the special prosecutor insisted that they have jurisdiction to probe this matter, and they went ahead. So when the CID was investigating that matter in 2019, the special office of the special prosecutor was probing that same matter in 2019. Today, in 2020, CID is probing a matter. Petition has been submitted to the office of the special prosecutor, and the special prosecutor is relying its decline on the fact that the CID is also investigating the matter.
Yeah, I mean, but doesn't that well, you may point to that as an inconsistent, but doesn't that raise factual issues, though, that indeed, yes, one state agency is doing the probe already, people have already been arrested and are being investigated and granted bail? Isn't it true that another state investigative body entering into that same arena, as the special prosecutor points out, will be a dissipation of public resource?
And I clearly disagree with the special prosecutor on that, and that is why I have pointed out the precedent. There is a clear precedent. So what happened in 2019? That when the CID was investigating the matter, so the special prosecutor went in and opened an investigation to the same matter with the same state resources. Clearly, so in 2019, it wasn't a waste or an abuse of state resources.
Let's look at quickly the substance of the petition you presented, which the special prosecutor calls partly conjecture. You say you based it, one, on the social media video in which individuals purporting to be close to the minister, including the minister himself, are head making all manner of allegations against each other. You refer to the 500 missing excavators, but then you also bring up some 4,000 plus and other mining equipment and 2,000 plus weapons and ammunition seized from illegal small-scale miners that you claim cannot be accounted for. You conclude that the latest revelations of corruption, the fight against Galamsey, quoting your own words, show that the whole fight against illegal mining was a sham and a plot to get licensed small-scale miners out of business so that some elements in government can take over small-scale mining in the country. That is clearly conjecture.
It is not. And let me say emphatically that the special prosecutor do not have the power to determine whether an issue is conjecture or not when it has not officially launched investigation into the matter. If the special prosecutor has not investigated the matter, how then does the special prosecutor come to the conclusion that they are conjectures? On what fact are they basing their conclusions on? Because again, we told the special prosecutor that we have other and better evidences. We have witnesses
who we have lined up, and we made it clear to the special prosecutor that when they need witnesses, we have witnesses who are ready to testify in any investigation and provide further evidence. We've gone to mining areas where we've taken pictures. We've taken pictures of our water bodies, and we've attached that to the petition for the office of the special prosecutor. How is the contamination of our water bodies conjectured? How is the non-reclamation of our land conjectured? So clearly, you could see that the special prosecutor has lost it. And for me, this matter has damaged the reputation of the special prosecutor.
I want you to hold the line for me briefly, Mr. Thompson. I want to bring in lawyer and Director of Advocacy and Policy Engagement at the Center for Democratic Development, CDD, Mr. Kojas. And Mr. Sante, thank you for joining me on Top Story.
Good evening, and good evening to your listeners.
I know you've spoken before passionately about this Galamsey fight. You believe is one of those existential threats. And so I guess I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the response given by the special prosecutor to this petition. What's your own reading as a lawyer first, and as somebody in advocacy very concerned about corruption matters on this response?
Thank you. So let's. I think we need to separate the matters. So the first one, maybe the easier one to deal with, is the issue of duplication. So, I mean, we and myself have advocated very strongly that one of the problems or the challenges we are facing in the anti-corruption sector is having parallel investigations and mandate creeping and so on, between various agencies. We've had the Metro Mass Transport issue. We've had even the Charles Bisu issue with the CID and the special prosecutor. So it's important when that issue is being taken seriously by institutions like the special prosecutor. Special prosecutor, when it comes to corruption-related offenses, has the mandate. He can decide that he can delegate that mandate. If he thinks that somebody already is better placed to deal with it, he can delegate it or allow the person to move with the whole objective of trying to, as he says, protecting the public purse, avoiding duplication, and so on and so forth. So I think on that score, it's important that we recognize that is an important part of the anti-corruption fight. But I think the issue that has been raised for me, the second part of the issue is where I have a concern. So even if the special prosecutor has just decided that because of duplication and so on, he can't take it on. He will allow the CID to take it on and forward all the particulars of the complaint to the CID. That should have been fine. The rejection, or I don't know whether it's a rejection because he's already saying he couldn't take it, but the rejection of it on the basis of Section 79 is where I have real concern. So if you look at Section 79, which is of the OSP Act, the interpretation section, corruption and corruption-related offenses, there are three categories. Yeah. You have certain specific offenses under the Criminal Code of 1960, Act 29. And then you have certain offenses under the Public Act 665. And then you have offenses that are related to the two, both the Criminal Code and the Public Procurement Act. If you go through the Criminal Code offenses that are implicated, so if you take Section 179C, for instance, I fail to see, based on the issues we are dealing with relating to this matter. So if you take 179C, for instance, using public office for profit, it says any person who, while holding the public office, corruptly or dishonestly abuses the office for private profit or benefit, or being a holder or a public office act or is found to have acted in collaboration with a person holding a public office for the latter to corruptly or dishonestly abuse the office for private profit or benefit, commits an offense. I think any of the matters that have been put out in respect of the excavators, whether it is the missing excavators, whether it's the video, which for me I think is sufficient evidence to trigger a probe, that people are conspiring, to use their office, for a private benefit, which is a political party or a group of people, that for me should trigger an investigation. So I am quite surprised that that judgment was concluded based on the information that was presented. But it also raised a question about what is sufficient information in a complaint to trigger the OSP's investigation. Maybe there needs to be some clarification, because if based on this, it's rejected. So if there was no other person looking at this, how would the public know what it is that they are supposed to bring to trigger the OSP's mandate? So it does raise some issues. It's a moot issue in that respect, in the sense that the duplication justification is already put out. But it does raise this issue going forward for what kind of information is needed for a public complaint. So for me, I think on that score, really, I'm concerned about the way that Section 79 is being interpreted. But regardless, I would say even if it doesn't work with the OSP, ASEPA can go to SHRAJ, which has an original mandate on corruption.
I'm grateful that you joined us. That is Dr. Kojo Asante. He is lawyer and director of advocacy and policy engagement at the Center for Democratic Development. Let me bring back Mr. Mensah Thompson, executive director of ASEPA. Mr. Thompson, so what's your next step? What next?
We are going to meet with our lawyers tomorrow to further discuss the matter, and then we'll come up with our next line of action. But I just want to assure the general public that this matter has not ended yet. This is the beginning of our fight to ensure that everything, every amount, every penny spent by the state in this Galamsey fight, any item that was lost in the Galamsey fight, any mining equipment that was seized and cannot be accounted for in the Galamsey fight, will get to the bottom of the matter. I can assure the general public about that.
You just heard the suggestion by Dr. Asante that one of the possible, means of redress could be SHRAJ. Is this something you're going to consider?
Yes, we are looking at those internal mechanisms. We also will possibly explore other international mechanisms, because when we have the IUCN, the International Union, which deals with these natural matters when it comes to the protection of the environment and what have you. There are other international statutes that we can also trigger in that regard. And so we're also exploring that other aspect as well.
I'm grateful that you could join us. That is Executive Director of ASEPA, Mensah Thompson. He signed that particular petition that has now been rejected by the Special Prosecutor on two grounds. One, that the CID is already investigating, and so the Special Prosecutor says it simply doesn't want to duplicate that investigation. And then it says in those circumstances it will not have been in the interest of safeguarding the public purse for this office to offer to refer to its investigation division the same matters being investigated. And secondly, that the petition itself was based on conjecture and facts that did not raise any issues of corruption and corruption related offenses. Very quickly, I want to quickly bring in the Institute of Economic Affairs. They have been holding a forum today at which they put out analysis of the fight against corruption in the last 3 years. I want you to listen to Dr. John Kwache. He's a research director at IEA, criticizing the Special Prosecutor's Office for lack of prosecution of cases and inability to lead the fight against corruption.
The systems to detect and prosecute corruption are inherently ineffective, and that is why we do not see people jailed, a lot of people being jailed. The special prosecutor has been in place for about 2.5 years, but he has not prosecuted a single corruption case. He has been resourced and everything. He hasn't prosecuted a single corruption case. In fact, if we are not careful, the special prosecutor's office itself will be corrupted, you know.
So that there was Dr. John Kwache, Research Director at the Institute of Economic Affairs. As you may well know, this particular issue with the missing excavators and this fight against Galamsey has been one of the most hotly contested political subjects in the last couple of weeks. In the wake of the conclusions reached by the special prosecutor on this petition, what is it that the two main political parties, they've been fighting on this in the public space for a while, make of it? First on the phone line is the communications director of the New Patriotic Party. He's a lawyer himself and a member of parliament for Adenton constituency. Mr. Yababian Samwa joins us on the telephone line right now. Mr. Masama, your reaction to this, these conclusions reached, especially in the last paragraph by the special prosecutor?
Intriguing. On both points, I'm interested in the possibility of more collaboration between the different agencies. For the special prosecutor to acknowledge that the CID, in his opinion, could be trusted to deliver on an investigation is heartwarming. It means that institutional linkage could be developing. We are not there yet, but if it does and it develops, and all those agencies involved in transparency, enhancing accountability institutions work together and leverage their strengths, we'll be getting somewhere. The second aspect is where the special prosecutor seeks to define corruption-related offenses within the mandate of his office. It was one of the difficulties in setting up the office that we were unable at that time, due to the press of time, to define what corruption really is. The word corruption has become a political football in this country. And everything to do with your opponent's governance and sometimes inadvertent misgovernance is to label it as corruption. And in that sense, you create a monster out of that word. So if we are going to get to the point where we realize that not everything can be labeled as corruption, and that there are things that can be seen as mere theft or administrative inadvertence or otherwise, willful negligence or whatever, then we would be actually getting to the point where we can refine what we see as institutional corruption and deal with it appropriately. So it's heartwarming. As to I heard a bit from the IEA about the Special Prosecutor's Office. I've had numerous arguments with them, but I think that it is an office that we must all support to set up well, because clearly it's an office we need.
Just before you join us also, we spoke to Dr. Kojo Asante, lawyer and director of advocacy policy engagement at the CDD, and he says he's surprised and concerned by the conclusions reached by the special prosecutor in defining corruption and using it as a basis to say that a petition before him did not raise any issues of corruption. He thought that conclusion has issues. And at least, in fact, his interpretation is that this clearly falls within that definition of corruption which the special prosecutor is mandated to execute in his office.
That is exactly what I began by saying, that I'm intrigued by the whole issue, that the office is looking at a definition. Because if Dr. Asante will admit, it is something that anti-corruption campaigners are worried about. What exactly is corruption in the context of what we do? The Americans have a different definition. TI has a different definition.
In that case, isn't it that using public office for private gain?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Is it sufficient for our purposes?
He believes in this case, and look at the petition that went to the special prosecutor. The special prosecutor should have looked into the matter, because if you use that definition, then the leaked video, for example, at least in the bare minimum qualifies.
That is his opinion. I'm not going to engage his opinion. I am saying that for me, it's interesting that now the special prosecutor himself is raising issues of definition, and that going forward, either as a country, we'll be compelled to look at a definition and see whether we can round it off entirely, or we'll have to depend on the special prosecutor's view of what his mandate is.
Do you approve?
You can't fight him.
Do you approve the decision, the conclusions reached? Do you support? Do you back it?
I am interested in a resolution. I am interested in the resolution, whichever way it comes. I wasn't even expecting or aware that it had gone to that level. I have always been talking about the reference to the police. The police is also an institution we must believe in and support. So I am interested in a resolution, whether it comes from the police or it comes from the Special Prosecutor's Office. It's important that we get to the bottom of matters that are referred to law enforcement agencies.
I'm grateful that you joined us. That's Yababi Asamazi, Director of Communications with the New Patriotic Party. Also joining me right now, briefly, it's Mr. Sami Jemfi, the National Communications Officer of the NDC. Mr. Jemfi, I'm pretty sure you've seen this response from the Special Prosecutor. Your reaction? I think we lost him there. We'll try and get him on the telephone line and pick the thoughts of the NDC on this when we can get him